Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. All three. Welcome to a review session of the New York City Planning Commission. Jackie, please begin.
Good day. Today is Monday, February 3rd, 2014, and a quorum is present. The first item on the agenda is a presentation by Jenny Fernandez, Director of Intergovernmental and Community Relations for the Landmarks Preservation Commission. Jenny will make a presentation on the South Village Historic District.
Thank you, Jackie. Commissioners. The South Village Historic District consists of approximately 250 buildings, including row houses, tenements, commercial structures, and institutions that illustrate the growth of the neighborhood from an affluent residential area in the early 19th century to a vibrant community of artists and working-class immigrants in the early 20th century. Development in this area began in earnest during the 1820s and 30s, when unprecedented growth pushed the limits of the city northward and made the blocks of the historic district one of New York's most prestigious residential neighborhoods. Many block fronts were developed with architecturally harmonious rows of houses, most of which were given distinguished-sounding addresses such as St. Clement's Place, Varick and Amity Places, and Carroll Place. Several early houses remain from this period and recall the South Village's history as a fashionable residential district. The tall, late Federal-style buildings on the north side of Bleecker Street were originally part of the Carroll Place Terrace. While unusual Gothic Revival-style houses on McDougal Street were built as part of St. Clement's Place, the ones featured triple-height iron porches and retained their distinctive pointed arch windows and door openings on the first story. Other smaller rows and individual houses from this period can be found throughout the district. The Federal style is well represented by a pair of houses on Bleecker Street, now part of the Little Red Schoolhouse, as well as a small group on McDougal that have already received individual landmark designation. The Greek Revival style distinguishes houses on West 4th and McDougal Streets, as well as the survivor of the Varick Place Terrace on what is now Sullivan Street. By the 1850s, immigrants began to settle in the area as wealthier residents moved farther uptown. Many row houses were converted from multiple family dwellings and boarding houses, and eventually new purpose-built tenements began to slowly replace the older building stock. The tenements within the district represent a range of styles and were designed according to an evolving set of building codes, including examples of pre-law Italian and Neo-Greek style buildings from the 1860s and 1870s. It was also during this period that the blocks around Moneta Street and Moneta Lane came to be known as Little Africa, which at the time was the largest African-American community in New York. The Tenement House Act of 1879 led to the adoption of the dumbbell plan, typical of most old law tenements. Stylistically, the neo-Greek remained popular throughout the 1880s, while architects also began using elements of the Queen Anne style. By the 1890s, tenement design had reached its pinnacle of flamboyance. Facades typically featured richly molded terracotta detailing, textured brickwork, densely layered belt courses, projecting piers and boldly masked cornices. The exuberant Queen Anne style remained widely used, while the classically inspired Renaissance revival also gained favor. The area also contains a number of tenements built under the so-called New Law, passed in 1901. It was during this period of late 19th and early 20th century that the neighborhood became predominantly Italian, as newly arrived immigrants settled in the area. The historic district also contains a number of architecturally distinctive commercial and industrial buildings, particularly along the larger thoroughfares of West Houston Street and LaGuardia Place. Institutions also have a significant history in the area. The Mills House No. 1 on Bleecker Street was conceived as a model residential hotel for single working men. It opened in 1897 and was designed by Ernest Flagg, an architect noted for his work with the reform housing movement. While New York University built its Vanderbilt Law School building at 40 Washington Square North. Completed in 1951, it is an early example of contextual design. The historic district contains many notably intact historic buildings. Nevertheless, the stylistic and commercial alterations from the early 20th century are also a defining characteristic of the neighborhood. The north-facing studio windows installed on these houses on Bleecker Street, for example, are typical of renovations undertaken during the Bohemian rediscovery of the village. Throughout the 20th century, the blocks of the historic district have served as one of the most important social and cultural centers in the city. The area was the center of early gay and lesbian life in New York and remained so throughout the 20th century, while its music clubs nourished generations of artists. Bohemians and beatniks congregated in its famous cafes, and flourishing off-Broadway scene developed in its small theaters. The South Village Historic District retains its unique sense of place, and its buildings and streetscapes tell the story of both its early development in the 19th century and of the artistic and social movements that made the village famous throughout the 20th century. On June 25, 2013, the Landmarks Preservation Commission held a public hearing on the proposed designation of the South Village Historic District. 24 people spoke in support of designation, including representatives for City Council Speaker Christine Quinn, State Senator Brad Hoylman, State Assembly Member Deborah Glick, and Manhattan Community Board 2. Several residents and property owners also spoke in support of designation, as did representatives for the Bleecker Area Merchants and Residents Association, Clinton, Charlton Street Block Association, Greenwich Village Society for Historic Preservation, Historic Districts Council, New York Landmarks Conservancy, and the Society for the Architecture of the City. The Commission received a letter in support of designation from City Council Member-elect Corey Johnson. The Commission also received 5 letters and emails regarding the proposed designation, 3 in support of designation and 2 requesting that their property be removed from the proposed historic district, as well as a postcard campaign comprising 104 submissions supporting designation. On December 17, 2013, the Commission voted to designate the South Village Historic District. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Fernandez? Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. We'll now have a presentation by Vivian Honor of the Manhattan office. We have a public hearing on this historic district this Wednesday, and Vivian will describe the historic district's relationship with the zoning resolution, projected public improvements, and plans for the area.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. First, a look at the land uses. The historic district is essentially this area in the center of the map. It's a mix of residential buildings, commercial buildings, and residential buildings with ground floor commercial uses. The area in purple here is the Greenwich Village Historic District, and the area in green is the South Village Historic District. Close to the entire South Village District is located within an R72 zoning district with a C15 zoning overlay, with the exceptions being the northern boundary of the district along Washington Square Park, portions of both sides of Sullivan Street and Thompson Street, between McDougal Street, West 3rd Street, and Bleecker Street, and the southern boundary of the district. An R72C15 zoning district allows residential FAR of 3.44, a commercial overlay FAR of up to 2, and a community facility FAR of 6.5. There are no projected public improvements in the vicinity of the South Village Historic District, and in addition, staff does not believe that the designation conflicts with the zoning resolution.
Thank you, Vivian. Any questions for Vivian? Good to see Vivian again.
Thanks, Vivian. Let's now move to item number 2, page 11, proposed modification of a special permit to facilitate improvements to an existing covered pedestrian space located at 560 Lexington Avenue. Our presenter is Dominic. That's item number 2, page 11. The record will reflect that Commissioner Cerullo has recused from this item.
Can't leave, Fred. No, not the building.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair, Commissioners. This is an application for a modification of a special permit granted pursuant to former zoning resolution section 7487, which approved floor area bonus for a covered pedestrian space located at 560 Lexington Avenue. To facilitate an upgrade to the covered pedestrian space. The location is here on Lexington Avenue, East 50th Street. It's the northwest corner. This site is a 17,000 square foot site, and it's split between a C66 district on the Lexington Avenue portion, and the mid-block portion is a C5 2.5. The frontage on Lexington Avenue is about 89 feet and about 180 feet on East 50th Street, and is located in the Special Midtown District. There is a building currently on the site, a 22-story office building, and the construction of which was facilitated by not only the special permit for the covered pedestrian space, which granted a bonus, but also another special permit that afforded height and setback waivers. And that was in 1978. So, this is a site plan. So currently, the yellow indicates the portion of the site plan that is the covered pedestrian space. This is Lexington Avenue here, 50th Street here, and the portion here that wraps around the covered pedestrian space is Arcade, which is not part of, is not being modified as pursuant to this application. Some of the amenities that currently exist, I'll show you, and I'll see if I can show you on the photograph. There's some benches that are located here, benches without backs. It is all red brick paver. There's a small planted area located here, very close to 50th Street. There's also a telephone booth, which is located right here. And the main amenity of this space is an entrance here to the number 6 train downtown platform. And you can see on this photograph here some of the amenities. You know, it is a little dark. This is Lexington Avenue here, 50th Street here. This is the subway. You can see the columns, which are cylindrical and metallic. Here is an art installation that's on the wall that is a little hard to see due to the lighting. It's located right there. Other aspects of this space, 2 retail areas. One is here, one is there, and this here is the main entrance to the office building. While not part of the covered pedestrian space, the 1978 approvals also noted that the subway entrance would provide access to a branch of the New York City Public Library, which is one level down from this space. So the proposed upgrades are described here. Just moving to the site plan here. Again, the yellow delineates the covered pedestrian space. The main upgrades are as follows. Number 1, the subway enclosure is being upgraded. The size of the stairs, etc., will be the same, but it'll be a new glass enclosure, which I'll show you a rendering of that in a few minutes. The paving, you see this, would now be white granite. The columns would now be, instead of being circular around it, would be limestone. And the benches, which were formerly wood benches without back, would be replaced by about 14 seats, 28 linear feet around the subway, and also here, the addition of 4 movable tables and 8 movable chairs. You can see some of these amenities as shown here. You see the circular subway entrance, columns, art installation will stay, but now with the improved lighting, it's much easier to see. So moving on, to describe the subway improvements a little more in depth. This is the existing subway enclosure. This is 50th Street here. Entrance is through here, down 1 level, and then to this level, where there's access to the New York City Public Library branch, and then down another level, which leads to the entrance to the downtown 6. The proposal is to replace this as I mentioned earlier, the circular shape of the benches. And rendering of that. This is a view looking in from Lexington Avenue, the 50th Street over there. This is the view, I'm sorry, wrong one. This is the view from 50th Street looking in. Oh, sorry. Let me just put this. be the proposed subway enclosure improvement. And then one level down, like this, just to give you perspective, this right here would be where the public library would be located on one level down, and then one level down farther from this would be directly accessible, would afford direct access to the turnstiles for the subway. Lastly, I'd like to note the improvements near 50th Street with the addition of 4 tables and 8 chairs. This is a rendering. Currently, this is a coffee shop. So currently, it worked really well, but regardless, it is not only 14 seats around the subway, but also an additional 8 seats located in that corner. So just to reiterate, the only modifications being requested is for the special permit for the covered pedestrian space, not the height and setback that was granted more than 30 years ago. So on December 13th, 2013, Manhattan Community Board 5 issued a letter on this application which expressed an approval of this proposal. Vote was 34 in favor, 0 opposed, and 1 abstaining. It was not a conditional approval, but the Community Board did note in their letter that which you have in your packages, they urged the Commission, City Planning, MTA, and also the applicant to try to work towards extending the hours of operation. Currently, for the subway entrance, the subway entrance is open 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And also what's been included in your packages is a letter of response from the applicant, which noted that they would like to work towards this and recommend a 9 o'clock closing for the subway. I've been in contact with, you see the MTA was also CC'd on that letter. I've been in contact with several people at the MTA, and what they've told me, and this is it's great that 560 Lex will keep the entrance open. We'll work on coordinating from our end. Don't foresee any issues, and the fact that the owner wants to do this is great. So that responds to what the comment was from the community. So are there any questions?
Thank you, Dominic. A very different look from what exists now. Questions? Michelle?
Dominic, thanks for walking through that. Are there any changes to the signage at all for the library? It just seems like not all that well known that it's there. At least maybe that's my impression.
I don't know if there are any changes to the signage for the library.
Apparently, why the library is there is that this building displaced a library, hence it was relocated. That was my question. That's a rather strange place for a library. Apparently, the library was there. Other questions? Anna?
Yes, Dominic, I'm glad you were in touch with the MTA about this, because that seems like a good opportunity. Do you anticipate, is that the end of the conversations with the MTA, or are we likely to get a letter from the MTA that could become part of our action on this?
I can definitely ask for one.
I think it'd be really helpful to have that commitment documented, because
Sure, I
it would be a
understand.
good thing.
I understand.
Thanks.
Richard?
Thank you. And also, in follow-up to Michelle's comment earlier, or question earlier, it probably doesn't hurt maybe to see if they can work with the library to increase the signage, because from the street level, there's no knowledge. You have no recognition that there's a library down there.
There might. I can't absolutely say there isn't any. I'm trying to recall the many times I've visited. I can't recall just seeing one in my head, but there might actually be some sort of signage that
Improve signage, then.
Clearly, the bookworms know about it.
Other questions for Dominic? Other questions? Okay, okay. What we do in these instances, Commission, is by a show of hands, which would indicate approval, we would send an approval letter to the Department of Buildings. So I need to solicit your position on this.
I'm sorry.
You have a question?
Is the approval contingent upon receipt of the letter that Commissioner Levin requested? Or is it questions?
I can say that one of the reasons why we're concerned about getting a letter from the MTA immediately is that they will have to do some work. There are legal documents involved as well in terms of really trying to work out that arrangement. So, that really would slow the process down. We will absolutely work with the MTA since we already have a verbal agreement. But I think that, considering this modification to the to the plan and a huge improvement, we would like to have the Commission's assent today to send the letter.
All in favor, please indicate by raising your hands. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dominic.
So we'll now move to item number 3, page 70. It's a proposed City Planning Commission certification to facilitate the transfer of development rights from listed theaters to granting sites within the theater subdistrict of the Special Midtown District. Our first is 239 West 52nd Street. Now, presenter is Carolina. And then we'll have another one that's the same action. And that presentation will be by Richard. So the first one is item number 3, page 70. Carolina.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Roseland Development Associates, care of Algen Management, seeks a commission certification pursuant to Section 81-744A for transfer of 58,392 square feet of development rights from the Majestic and Broadhurst theaters to property at 239 West 52nd Street in Manhattan Community District 5. This application was referred for 60-day review on November 18th. In order to aid the preservation and rehabilitation of existing theaters and protect the character of Manhattan's theater district, the Special Midtown District provides a mechanism for the transfer of development rights from listed theaters as designated in the zoning resolution and numbered here on this map. Actually, let me see if this might work. Numbered here on this map. The theater subdistrict is bounded by West 40th Street to the south, West 57th Street, 6th Avenue, and 8th Avenue. The use of this provision requires a contribution to the theater subdistrict fund. The applicant proposes to transfer floor area from 2 listed theaters to 239 West 52nd Street, which is a C-shaped lot. Oh, I'm sorry, this is a wrong one. A C-shaped lot bounded by West 52nd Street, West 53rd Street, Broadway, and 8th Avenue. The receiving site is currently improved with the single-story Roseland Theater, which is shown here. This is the 53rd Street frontage, and this is the West 52nd Street frontage. As you can see, there are just 2 small areas of frontage on West 52nd Street, and the majority of the frontage is on West 53rd. The receiving site is also part of a merged zoning lot that includes abutting Lot 7, which is occupied by the Virginia Theater. Although it shares a zoning lot with the receiving site, the Virginia Theater is not part of the receiving site. The C65 zoning district in the theater subdistrict of the Special Midtown District permits a base of 10 FAR, which can be increased to 12 FAR through the transfer of development rights from a listed theater. The receiving site has a lot area of 29,196 square feet and can therefore receive up to 58,392 square feet. Two theaters or granting sites are proposed to transfer unused development rights. The Majestic and Broadhurst theaters are located on adjacent blocks on West 44th Street, adjacent to, between 8th Avenue and Broadway, in the C65 Special Midtown District. The Broadhurst will transfer 1,182 square feet to the receiving site and will retain 3,500 square feet of unused floor area. The Majestic will transfer 57,000 square feet of floor area to the receiving site and will retain roughly 1,000 square feet of unused floor area. In total, the full 2 FAR, or 58,392 square feet, that the receiving site is eligible to receive will be transferred to 239 West 52nd Street. The applicant proposes to develop a 59-story building, approximately 660 feet tall, residential, a mix of residential and commercial uses on the receiving site, containing approximately 454,660 square feet of zoning floor area. The building will comply with all applicable zoning regulations and is designed to meet Special Midtown District daylight compensation standards. It will be constructed as of right. The applicant has met the requirements of sections 81-743 and 81-744. Copies of the appropriate legal documents have been filed with this application assuring continued use of the Majestic and Broadhurst sites as legitimate theaters. The Landmarks Preservation Commission has reviewed the building inspection reports. The buildings are physically and operationally sound and do not require any maintenance programs, and the applicant will also deposit $1,027,699 into the Theater Subdistrict Fund. On December 12, 2013, Manhattan Community Board 5 recommended approval of the certification, noting, however, regret that the applicant had not incorporated a space for the Roseland Theater in the new development, and urging that the frequency of adjusting the contribution rate to the Theater Subdistrict Fund be reconsidered, suggesting an annual adjustment rather than every 3 years. The application was also referred to the Borough President, City Council, and Theater Subdistrict Council, who did not provide comments.
Okay, thank you, Carolina. Questions for Carolina? Michelle, and then Anna.
So, Carolina, regarding the recommendation by the Community Board about specifically reviewing the contribution rate for the Theater Subdistrict Fund, have there been discussions among staff about that? What would the process be? Because it does seem almost criminal that it's only $1 million to achieve such significant transfer of air rights.
Of course, the air rights are sold, are purchased from the theater. So the contribution is in addition to the purchase price of the funds. The contribution rate was last adjusted in October 2011, and the zoning resolution requires an adjustment of between every 3 to 5 years. In 2011, at the time that the last adjustment was made to $17.60, staff made a commitment to reviewing that adjustment rate every 3 years, and that was something that was discussed as a result of a recommendation by Community Board 5. And the rate is due to be adjusted again at the end of this year.
October of this year.
And that involves an appraisal?
It's based on the assessed value, and that's something that the department does.
Anna.
That was my question. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Carolina? Okay. Again, I would request a show of hands that would demonstrate support, approval of the proposal, and we will send an approval letter to the Department of Buildings. Show of hands. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Let's now move to item number 4, which is a similar action, but this is for property at 701 7th Avenue, and our presenter is Richard. It's item number 4, page 98.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is an application for a commission certification pursuant to zoning resolution section 81744A to permit the transfer of 44,988.16 square feet of unused development rights from the Booth and Plymouth theaters in the theater subdistrict of the Special Midtown District to the zoning lot at 701 7th Avenue. This application is returning from a 60-day referral to the community board, local council member, and the borough president. This transfer will facilitate the improvement and enlargement of the existing vacant building at 701 7th Avenue for hotel and retail uses, and will permit a 20% or 2.8 FAR increase in floor area over the site's maximum allowable FAR of 14. 34,688.16 square feet are proposed to be transferred from the Plymouth Theater, and 10,300 square feet from the Booth Theater. The granting sites for this requested transfer, the Booth Theater shown at the bottom. Let me try this one. And the Plymouth Theater here in the top, are listed theaters per zoning resolution section 81742, and both their interiors and exteriors were designated as city landmarks in 1987. The theaters are located adjacent to one another here on West 45th Street between 7th and 8th Avenues. The left one here is the Plymouth, and the one to the right is the Booth Theater. Both theaters are located in a C65 zoning district, which permits a maximum FAR of 10. The receiving site, 701 7th Avenue, is located on the corner of West 45th Street and 7th Avenue, catty corner from the TKTS booth and the Times Square pedestrian plaza. The site is currently developed with a 10-story office building that is currently vacant. Located in the C67T zoning district, the maximum FAR for the site is 14, increasable up to 16.8 through a transfer of development rights from listed theaters. The applicant proposes to demolish a portion of the existing building at 701 7th Avenue and to enlarge it with an approximately 203,500 square foot or 16.8 FAR building. This here is a view of the existing condition today. This is looking at the corner of 46th and 7th. This would be 7th. This would be 46th, looking up at the building. And this is a view further uptown 7th Avenue, looking towards 47th Street. And then this is a view of the proposed design. The building will maintain more than 25% of the existing floor area so that they may maintain their existing street wall of approximately 126 feet. The new development will contain 39 stories and a mezzanine level of hotel use with retail uses on the lower 5 floors. Both the Plymouth and Booth Theater sites located in the C65 district have a maximum allowable FAR of 10. The Plymouth site is currently developed with a 1.8 FAR building and has 79,488.72 square feet of development rights remaining for transfer. Of this amount, the applicant proposes to transfer 34,688.16 square feet to the receiving site. The Booth Theater site is developed with a 1.53 FAR building and, following 2 previous transfers, has 11,298.91 square feet remaining. The applicant proposes to transfer 10,300 square feet of this remaining floor area to the receiving site. The total transfer of 44,988.16 square feet represents 20% of the receiving site's base FAR of 14, which represents the maximum permitted through a transfer of development rights. The transfer will ensure continued maintenance of the 2 theaters, continued operation of the theater uses, ongoing inspections to be reported every 5 years to the chair of this commission, to the Landmarks Preservation Commission, and to the Theater Subdistrict Council, and there will be a deposit of $791,791.62 into the Theater Subdistrict Fund. This application was referred to Manhattan Community Board 5, the local council member, and the borough president. The council member and the borough president did not issue any recommendations for the transfer. The community board, by a vote of 34-0 with 1 abstention, recommended approval of the application, but again asked the commission to reconsider the contribution rate of to the Theater Subdistrict Fund, which is currently set at $17.60. Furthermore, the application was referred to the Theater Subdistrict Council, who did not issue any comments on the application. Thanks.
Thank you, Richard. Questions for Richard? Angela.
Just a point of curiosity. I guess it is the Booth Theater.
Yeah.
Has enough floor area to be transferred without receiving from both sites? Why would they?
I'm sorry?
Right? Couldn't they? The amount of square footage that the Booth Theater has that could be transferred is 44,988. Correct?
The booth has 11,298.
Okay, then the opposite.
Right.
The Plymouth 44,988.
The Plymouth could take it up. So the Plymouth has 79,488. And the total transfer is, they're taking 34,688.
Right. So wouldn't it make more sense to just receive from one site if there's enough square footage? It's just a point of curiosity.
I guess it would.
All right. All right.
I don't know how this all went down.
Okay. Just point of curiosity.
Other questions for Richard? Okay, commissioners. Once again, we need a show of hands to demonstrate support for this and have a letter of approval sent to the Department of Buildings. Show of hands. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Commissioners. Let's now move to item number 5, page 126, proposed modification of a special permit and chair certification to facilitate design and operational changes to an existing through-block arcade located at 10 East 53rd Street. Back from Community Board Review. So item number 5, Commissioner Cerullo is recused, page 126.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is an application by 10 East 53rd Owner LLC, and the applicant requests two actions: a minor modification of a previously approved special permit to allow for design and operational changes to an existing through-block arcade, and secondly, a chairperson certification pursuant to zoning resolution section 3765 to permit design changes to two existing 1961 plazas at 10 East 53rd Street in Manhattan, Community District 5. The item was referred out on November 18th, 2013, and is back now for post-referral. And I'm here to review the outcome of the Community Board's review and to discuss some refinements that were made to the application. But I want to give you just quickly an overview of the existing conditions. 10 East 53rd Street contains a 38-story commercial office building, ground floor retail uses, and a public through-block arcade, and two public plazas. The project is located on a through lot fronting on East 53rd Street to the north, East 52nd Street to the south. And again, the site contains two plazas, typically with a black granite banner right along the street lines, meeting an indoor through-block arcade, which is about 170 feet. And currently, the condition is unclosed, you can see here. And right now, there's no seating or signage that's provided in both plazas, and that's according to code. There's no requirement, and the same goes for the through-block arcade. It's not doesn't contain any public space signage. Roughly, you could see that in the existing condition site plan, the through-block arcade is of a sort of darker palette that runs from the plaza into the arcade and then out to the other plaza. So the actions requested again are to bring forward a comprehensive redesign and operational changes to the ground floor of the through-block arcade in an effort to modernize the 40-year-old building. I'll show you the proposed site plan. So the applicant proposes to enclose the through-block arcade entrances with glass revolving doors in order to provide a climate-controlled passageway and reduce its operating hours from 24 hours a day to 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. daily. There would be modifications made to the interior of the through-block arcade where there's walls and glass revolving doors providing access to a commercial office building. That wall would be removed, and the lobby would be modified as well. It's outside of through-block arcade. Additionally, there would be new signage to articulate that there's a through-block arcade that provides a passageway to a connecting street. And there are some artwork that would be proposed where today there is none, and new sort of storefronts along the walls of the through-block arcade. The proposed plaza design changes would upgrade the existing 1961 plazas so that they come into greater accordance with the new public plaza standards. And there would be an introduction of new wooden benches, movable tables and chairs, increased physical access into the plaza, green walls, art walls, and effectively change the darker palette to a lighter continuous gray palette from plaza into the arcade and then out through the other plaza. So in terms of the referral, on December 12th, Manhattan Community Board 5 recommended approval of the proposed modification by a vote of 34 in favor, 0 opposed, and 1 abstention, conditioned upon an extension of the proposed through-block arcade hours. So as proposed and what was referred out in November, the operating hours were 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. daily, and the applicant has agreed to extend the hours in response to the Community Board's recommendation to 6 a.m. to 12 a.m. So that's 2 hours earlier, 2 hours later. And the applicant has amended its application accordingly. So the current application reflects an operating hours of 6 a.m. to 12 a.m. At referral in November, the Commission asked as to whether, 2 questions, as to whether there was ADA access provided on 52nd Street. There will not be ADA access provided on 52nd Street, but ADA access is available on 53rd Street. Secondly, there were also concerns raised as to the height of the public space signage lettering in comparison to the building address signage. And I'll show you what we looked at in November. So these are just sort of zoomed in views, elevations of the 53rd Street frontage, where the arcade would be enclosed. What we showed in November provided for the public arcade lettering to be at a height of 8 inches, and the height of the building signage was 12. And in response to the concerns by the commission in terms of the relationship between the size of the arcade signage to the size of the building signage, the applicant has committed to raising the height of the signage for the arcade by 2 inches, so it's going from 8 inch to 10 inches. And you can see how that has expanded it across the doors and has retained a height of lettering for the building at 12 inches. So the applicant provided a letter, which is in your packet, detailing its response to the community board's concerns and reiterating its commitment to extending the hours of the operation of the three-block arcade, but then also addressing the height of this arcade signage in relation to the building signage. The applicant, as I stated, has adjusted its application to now reflect the 10-inch lettering for the arcade signage. However, while the applicant has committed to this, they are requesting that the commission consider an increase in the building signage height, so that's this, to 15 inches, and that's shown in your packets.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. Questions, particularly from, I don't recall who raised the issue about the size of lettering, but whoever it was, please weigh in.
It was me. This is fine. I mean, but the issue was whether or not people would know that this is a public space.
Right.
And to the degree that the lettering has been increased in size, I think it serves that purpose.
It looks fine to me. Anybody else?
And I just want to comment that I'm glad the operating hours were extended, because that was my issue, that people would be coming to work in the morning, but they wouldn't have access through the arcade. And I think I raised the issue about the ADA access, and I'm glad at least from one side there is. So just wanted to say that.
Okay. Any other questions? No. Okay. By a show of hands, could we send an approval letter to DOB? All in favor? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Thanks, Melissa. Our next item is item number 6, page 164. It's a proposed modification of a previously approved authorization to facilitate the conversion of accessory residential space to commercial space in a building located on Amsterdam Avenue between West 90th and 91st Street, back from Community Board Review, and our presenter is Beverly. It's item number 6, page 164.
Good afternoon, Commission members. This application is back from referral to Community Board 7. The applicant, Hayward Towers Associates, has requested a modification of a previously approved large-scale residential development pursuant to sections 98.06 of the zoning resolution. The building is located on the east side of Amsterdam, between 90th and 91st Street. It is situated in the previously urban renewal, Upper West Side urban renewal area in a C28 zoning district. In July of 2008, the City Planning Commission adopted a text amendment of the ownership provisions of the large-scale residential regulations. Since the regulations limited the amount of ground floor retail that could be provided on the sites of the large-scale residential development area. This text allowed individual owners of sites to request modification of the controls in order to construct enlargements and to provide ground floor retail that would utilize available floor area in accordance with the underlying zoning. As a result of the approved text amendment, the applicant is requesting a modification of their large-scale residential development site, which would facilitate the conversion of unused residential space to the ground floor retail space. This drawing shows existing conditions. The green represents existing ground floor retail on the corner of Amsterdam and 91st Street. You have a Mexican restaurant, a nail salon, and a beauty parlor. And the yellow represents existing ground floor residential space. This drawing represents the proposed, and of course you still have the existing ground floor retail. And this is the area basically on the corner of Amsterdam and West 90th Street that will be converted from ground floor residential floor area to ground floor retail space. It is approximately 2,635 square feet, and it is currently pram space and storage space and closets. This project was referred to Community Board 7 on October 16, 2013. The board voted 28 in favor of the conversion. And at the time of the referral, the commission raised a question as to whether or not the tenants of the building were aware of the conversion. They are aware of the conversion, and they have no comment.
Okay, questions for Beverly? Any questions? Okay, by a show of hands, could we indicate approval to send a letter of approval to DOB? Thank you.
Thanks, Beverly. Thanks, Commissioners. Let's now move to item number 7, page 184, proposed renewal of a special permit granted for bulk height and setback regulations to facilitate a mixed-use building at 470 Vanderbilt Avenue. This is a proposed special permit renewal. It's item number 7, page 184, and our presenter is Koichi.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is an application by Atara Residential LLC for the first 3-year renewal of a special permit that was originally approved in 2009. The previous approval granted a special permit for large-scale general development to modify the requirements for lot coverage, inner court recess, street wall location, and height and setback regulations to facilitate the development of a new mixed-use building which would contain a ground floor retail space and up to 376 dwelling units, including about 85 units of affordable housing. The project area is located in the Fort Greene neighborhood of Community District 2. The project area contains an existing 7 to 10-story loft building on the south, which contains about 584,000 square feet of office space. There's also a surface parking lot on the north along Burton Street here, which will be the site for the new mixed-use building. The project area is surrounded by a mixture of residential, institutional, commercial, and transportation-related uses. The area north of the project area is the Fort Greene Historic District. East of the project site is developed with a mixture of residential, institutional, and commercial buildings. 1 block west is the public school 753 and the athletic field for the Brooklyn Technical High School. One block farther west is the Atlantic Terminal project, which contains NYCHER's 31-story, 300-unit residential development. The area south from the project area is the Long Island Railroad's yard, which is part of the Atlantic Yard project. The Barclays Center is located approximately here relative to this photograph, just for your information. The project site consists of the entire city block 2009, covering the land area of about 2.9 acres. The project site was rezoned in 2009 from M11 district and R6 district with C23 commercial overlay along Fulton Street, this section, to C6-38 district with inclusionary housing designation. C638 is an R9 equivalent district that allows the commercial FAR of up to 6.0 and a base residential FAR of 6.5 or 8.5 maximum with the inclusionary housing bonus. The current tenant for the existing building include HRA, which occupies the most of the large portion of the floor area, NYCHER, educational organization, and a private technology company. The new building on the surface parking lot on this site will contain a ground floor retail space and up to 376 dwelling units. About 85 dwelling units will be allocated for affordable housing that would meet all the size and distribution requirements of the inclusionary housing program. The applicant requests a renewal of the previously granted special permit for 3 additional 3-year term. Zoning Resolution 1143 allows the City Planning Commission to renew a special permit which expires after 4 years for 2 additional 3-year terms, and this is the first renewal request. In the statement of findings, the applicant states that the facts upon which the Commission issued the special permit have not changed since its approval in 2009. This application was referred to Brooklyn Community Board 2 for a 45-day period, which ended on January 31st, 2014. On January 27th, 2014, the board's executive committee unanimously approved a favorable resolution to recommend a renewal of this special permit.
Thank you, Kiyoshi. Questions for Kiyoshi? Any questions? All righty. Again, I need a show of hands. Thank you. Letter to DOB.
Okay.
Sorry. Thank you, Kiyoshi.
We proceeded without.
Let's move to item number 8, page 213. It's a Queens pre-hearing application with respect to a proposed zoning map amendment to change an R32 and C22 to a C41 district to facilitate a wider range of commercial uses within an existing shopping center. It's item number 8, page 213, back from Community Board and Borough President review. And our presenter is Stephen.
It's a lot of reading.
Good afternoon. This application, which was certified on October 21st, was filed by Derp Associates, and it's to rezone a portion of a block located at the northerly intersection of Braddock Avenue and Hillside Avenue. This is in the Queens Village neighborhood of Queens Community District 13. The site is currently improved with a shopping center that was constructed pursuant to a BSA special permit that allows it to extend into a portion of the adjacent R32 zoning district. This proposed rezoning would remove the non-conforming condition that is currently allowed by this BSA special permit, as well as facilitate the continued use of this retail space within the existing shopping center by permitting a wider range of commercial uses. Rezoning area would apply to Block 7914, Lot 55, and a portion of adjacent tax Lot 2. Lot 55, which is currently controlled by the applicant, contains an existing shopping center with an anchor retail space of about 25,000 square feet. This is occupied by a Sears hardware store. There are two smaller retail stores also in this shopping center. There are approximately 6,522 and 3,869 square feet. These are occupied by an HSBC retail bank and an AutoZone retail store. The shopping center has a total height of 21 feet and was constructed in 1997 pursuant to the 1991 BSA special permit. Vehicular circulation on site is made possible by a curb cut on both Braddock Avenue and Hillside Avenue. Tax Lot 2, which comprises the remainder of the block, contains a portion of the two-story garden apartment cooperative development known as Bell Park Manor Terrace. With this application, the applicant proposes to eliminate the existing R32 and R32C22 districts from the zoning lot and establish a C41 zoning district. This would permit a wider range of commercial uses and include use groups 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, and 12. These permit a wider range of uses that serve a larger region than those permitted in the C22 district, such as specialty and department stores. The maximum permitted FAR for commercial and community facility uses will be 1, and the maximum permitted FAR for residential uses will increase to 1.25. With the location of the shopping center at the intersection of two heavily trafficked corridors, as well as the existing development, with these, it's unlikely that the property will be redeveloped for residential uses. So the rezoning district boundary will allow the existing shopping center to be fully located within the commercial district, but the residential developments to the west will not be placed in this commercial district boundary, so that the new boundary will eliminate the need for the BSA special permit, as well as facilitate this wider range of uses. So this was again certified on October 21st. The Community Board held its public hearing on December 16th and recommended approval by a vote of 22 in favor, 1 opposed, and 1 abstaining. And the Borough President held a hearing on January 16th and has also since recommended approval.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Questions? Questions? Okay. Is this on for public hearing?
Yes.
On Wednesday? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks.
Okay, Commissioners, let's move to the proposed future votes, post-hearing follow-ups. So this Wednesday, February 5th, staff have prepared favorable resolutions for the following. Union Turnpike rezoning proposal, which proposes to rezone an R32 and C12 zoning districts to R5D, C13 to facilitate a 4-story mixed-use development. We have the disposition of 2 city-owned properties in the Bronx. The East River text amendment, which is a proposal to amend docking capacity, parking, drop-off, and pickup areas within select zoning districts along the East River waterfront in Community District 1, Brooklyn. We have Yeshiva Rambam, which is a proposed disposition to facilitate the continued use of a school located at 3340 Kings Highway. And we have 434-440 Darlington Avenue, which is a proposed special South Richmond Development District certification to subdivide 1 zoning lot into 2 to facilitate 2 single-family homes. Moving on to February the 19th, we have 4 city map amendments concerning St. John's Place Bridge, the Montgomery Street Bridge, President Street Bridge, and the Union Street Bridge. They basically are applications to codify existing grade changes to bridges over the Franklin Avenue shuttle. We have the next item is 688 Broadway. This is our post-hearing follow-up discussion on this item. We thought that we would have David begin by, there's Edwin, I guess he'll. Sorry, you're not David.
No, not.
So anyway, going to be 2 presentations. David will talk about the eligibility requirements of Section 74712 of the ZR, and then Edwin will discuss the applicant's response to concerns that were raised during the public hearing. So David, we start with you.
At the public hearing on 688 Broadway, the Commission heard testimony that the project as proposed is not eligible for a special permit under 74-712 because the zoning lot was formed through the merger of two lots, the flea market lot on Broadway and the portion of Great Jones Alley, after December 2003, which is a date referenced in the text. The Department believes that the project is eligible because the site consists of land which meets the eligibility requirement of having been vacant as of 2003, and that the fact that the current zoning lot was formed after 2003 is not determinative. In other words, a project, in our view, is eligible where the site, which comprises the zoning lot, consists of land which meets one of the eligibility requirements under the regulation. So let me explain that a little bit. To understand it, you need to go back to why the reference to December 2003 is in the text to begin with. In November of 2003, the Commission approved a text amendment to allow by special permit for the modification of use regulations for vacant sites, land with minor improvements, or sites where not more than 20% of the site is occupied by a vacant building, in N15A and N15B districts located within historic districts. Now, until that time, 74-712 applied to bulk modifications only for sites that were vacant or consisted of land with minor improvements. The text that was certified in 2003 said nothing about December 2003. So where did that come from? At the 2003 CPC public hearing, a number of speakers testified that the text allowing for use changes could encourage the demolition of non-contributing buildings within the historic districts in order to make the sites eligible. And for that reason, the Commission found that limiting the applicability of the special permit to sites which were vacant or met one of the other eligibility criteria as of the adoption of the text was appropriate. The adoption date by the City Council was December 2003. So what this shows is the Commission's concern had nothing to do with restricting eligibility to a certain class of zoning lots, but rather with ensuring that demolition is not used to qualify for a permit. So let's assume that someone came in here as an applicant and showed us a zoning lot that had been formed recently consisting of property that as of 2003 had a building on it, but that had been demolished since. That's kind of an unlikely scenario for reasons having to do with the way LPC works, and that LPC probably would not have approved such a demolition. But putting that aside, it's clear that in that circumstance, the applicant would clearly not qualify for the permit. But the fact that the zoning lot didn't exist as of 2003 isn't really the question. The question is whether the land which comprises the zoning lot was made vacant through demolition. I should point out here that when the zoning resolution wants to restrict a provision to a class of zoning lots existing as of a certain date, it says so very specifically, using terms such as for zoning lots existing as of such and such a date, or zoning lots established as of such and such a date. And that is not the case in this provision. Just as an example, one example, and there are many, many examples of this, the waterfront regulations in defining a waterfront block state that any zoning lot, the boundaries of which were established prior to November 1st, 1993, and which is not closer than 1,200 feet from the shoreline, et cetera, shall be deemed outside of the waterfront block. Or take a provision of the Special South Richmond District that governs subdivisions, which says that within the special district, any zoning lot existing on September 11th, 1975, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all of these regulations have different purposes, but in each case, when they seek to define the eligibility or restriction to a class of zoning lots in existence as of a certain date, they do so through specific language, and that is not the case here. What I've described here, by the way, is also the interpretation and understanding that we've had in prior cases involving 74-712. For example, in the case of 150 Worcester, which we handled in 2013, the Commission adopted a text amendment to, in that case, to increase the percentage of existing lot coverage allowable on a site and expanded the eligibility of the special permit, which in that case, for that application, did not exist as a single zoning lot as of 2003. It was formed through merger, and the Commission's report specifically noted that the zoning lot consisted of two lots which had been merged. You may recall that 150 Worcester was not actually approved by the Council, but that was for reasons that had nothing to do with this particular issue. And finally, I would note that when we did the environmental review for 150 Wooster, we looked at this new text amendment expanding the ability of a building to cover a lot, and we looked at assemblages that could be created through merger as defining eligibility under the text amendment, demonstrating that it wasn't about the zoning lot, it was about the status of the property as of 2003. So those are the reasons why we think it is eligible and that the application can proceed. And I think Edwin's now going to go into the various other issues surrounding the application, unless there are any questions.
Any other questions for David? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chairman. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Last week, we received correspondence from the applicant addressing concerns raised at the January 22nd public hearing. We have forwarded that correspondence to you this past Friday in advance of today's discussion regarding this project. I will summarize the key points that were raised in the letter. Now, first of all, the applicant underscored their commitment to continue discussions with the residents of the Silk Building to address their concerns regarding light, air, and the foundation, and how their foundation relates to the foundation of the proposed building. Regarding lot line windows, the applicant stated in their letter that when the Silk Building received its approval from the BSA in the early 80s to convert from commercial use to joint living work quarter for artist space, the legal light and air for all habitable units were provided by windows on Broadway and on East 4th Street, and they complied with the multiple dwelling law provisions. At the public hearing, we heard testimony that several BSA-approved GLWQA units have been subdivided and that multiple bedrooms face out to the lot line and are dependent on those lot line windows for light and air. Accordingly, to address the air concerns raised by the Silk Building residents, the applicant will provide space for piping, which will run through a chase from the AC units on the Silk Building's south wall to condensers atop the proposed building, which is 688 Broadway. There will be 3 chases that will basically run from the 5th floor up to the top of the proposed building, and all the HVAC equipment will be placed atop the proposed building, not atop the Silk Building. I should note that the proposed building is lower than the Silk Building by about 1 story or so. So the rooftop mechanicals on the proposed building will not be at the same level as the rooftop for the Silk Building. Additionally, the applicant has stated in their letter that they will contribute $250,000 for the revision and new construction of this HVAC equipment. Also, as I said before, the mechanical equipment will be placed atop the proposed building, not atop the Silk Building. In terms of light, the Silk Building residents have proposed that the rear portion of the proposed building be redesigned so the bulk is shifted to the south. I have forwarded to the Commission earlier today a drawing. If the Commission would go to that drawing right now. This is the drawing right here. And what the residents of the Silk Building proposed was that a portion of the bulk of the proposed building, which is located here, be shifted to here. In conversations with the residents of the Silk Building, the applicant has told us that this really doesn't work for them. Well, first of all, as you can see in the drawing, the relocation, the shifting of the bulk to the south basically provides a light and air issue for the bedroom located along the south wall. That bedroom actually loses legal light and air. That said, the applicant has carefully considered the proposed redesign and believes that their design with the suggested provision of skylights, the applicant will provide skylights to serve the 3 units on the upper floors of the Silk Building, which will provide some legal light and air for some of the units, will best address some of the issues raised regarding light and air for this project. Also, in terms of the foundation, we've heard this at the public hearing as well, that the Silk Building residents expressed concerns about their foundation, and the applicant agreed not to underpin the Silk Building and has substantially revised the proposed project's foundation plan in order to accommodate this request. The applicant has shared their foundation plans with the Silk Building and has made their engineer and architect available to discuss the issue with the residents of the Silk Building. Now, In terms of unused development rights, there was an issue that was raised at the public hearing regarding the use of the alley's unused development rights. The alley generates about 9,575 square feet of development rights. What we've heard is that if the applicant doesn't use those unused development rights or the development rights generated by the alley, that the building would be lower in configuration. In the letter that we received from the applicant states that the 9,575 square feet basically comprises the upper 3 floors of the building, so that basically a 12-story building would drop to 9 stories or so with a penthouse. The proposed building, again, is 12 stories with a mechanical bulkhead. Lastly, in terms of as-of right, there was a concern raised about the difference between what could be built in the as-of right as opposed to what could be built with the special permit. The EAS examined what could be built, which was basically a hotel that comprised 46,000 square feet of floor area. This building would rise to 9 stories or 153 feet in height. The proposed building would rise to a height of 144 feet. So basically the as-of-right building would be a tad taller than the building that's being proposed by the applicant. That basically addressed the key points in the letter. I will answer any questions or comments you may have.
Thank you, Edwin. Questions for Edwin? Angela.
I'm sorry, Edwin. I just read this letter now, and I apologize because I didn't see it earlier. So with the 3 units with the skylights, how many units would still be blocked, their light and air?
There are 8 units that have light and air that would be blocked. 5 would be blocked.
That will be blocked.
Yeah, with the lot line.
And
yes.
three won't because of the, okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions for Edwin? Okay, this matter is scheduled for a vote on February 19th.
So, Commissioners, staff will be preparing a favorable report. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Also, on February the 19th, we have a proposed special permit to facilitate retail and gallery space within an existing building located at 104-110 Green Street. We will have the South Village Historic District proposal by LPC, and the Landmark will prepare a report with respect to the Bronx General Post Office interior landmark designation. In both instances, staff is unaware of any conflicts with the zoning resolution, rejected public improvements, or plans for growth in the area. The next item is Domino Sugar. This is our very first post-hearing follow-up. We do plan to continue this discussion in several weeks, but we thought it was important to clarify the actions, compare the previous proposal with the current proposal, describe current open space and design controls. We'll have a full discussion on the affordable housing component in several weeks when this comes back for our second post-hearing follow-up.
This is slated for a vote on the 5th of March, so we do have additional time to review
I'm sorry.
the other issues.
Just give us 1 second while this warms up.
All right. Waiting. We're waiting for the.
Where's Angela?
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is the post-hearing follow-up for the Domino Sugar redevelopment proposal that was at public hearing on January 22nd. I want to start by quickly reviewing the actions that are before the Commission. These include 4 special permits, zoning text amendments, and 3 authorizations for waterfront public access on the site. One of the The issues that came up was the comparison to the 2010 approvals that were in place for that special permit. Again, here's a rendering of the approved 2010 proposal, and including the relationship of the towers and the massing to the bridge. These buildings range in height from 300 to 340 feet. But again, the open space on that proposal was a short public walkway and a large lawn at the center, and there was a building located on the block between 4th and South 5th Street. The current proposal adjusts that site plan, eliminating the building located between 4th and 3rd and 4th Street, and so that mass is located on other blocks. That results in taller buildings that range from 435 feet to 535 feet, with the Williamsburg Bridge at about 310 feet. So this is the comparison of just the envelope for those special permit approvals on the prior plan and the current proposal. There was a request for some rendered three-dimensional drawings of this proposal in relationship to the bridge. So here is a view of the new proposed development from the Williamsburg Bridge looking toward the north and the east. Again, these are the 535-foot tower that is adjacent to the Williamsburg Bridge. This is the 530-foot tall building next to the refinery site, and the 435-foot tower at the northernmost block. This is a rendering looking south toward the bridge, along the shore public walkway, River Street, dividing the public space from the development blocks. This is the Site B, the donut building, with the Site E buildings, Site D buildings rising to 535 feet next to the bridge. And the applicant, these are draft images. They'll provide fully rendered images in the future. This is the rendering looking north toward the Williamsburg Bridge and the development from the south side of the bridge along Kent Avenue. And again, the Site D towers rising to 535 feet. Again, the top of the bridge is at about 310 feet. You also can see the upland block is rising at 170 feet at Kent Avenue. The next issue that came up was the discussions about the open space. There are waterfront authorizations under review that include waterfront access plan and phasing for open space. The transfer of open space to the city is one of the concerns. This was a mechanism that was created as part of the Greenpoint Williamsburg rezoning that created an option for the voluntary transfer of open spaces to the city. There is a statement about sites that have been transferred to the Williamsburg sites, Northside Piers and the Edge, that have been completed. They have transferred their open space to the city upon completion. There's one site, 184 Kent Avenue, that did not transfer, but that's because that site's public access is located in an arcade that is within the building. For the current proposal, the transfer does raise some issues with the open space. That includes unique features of the design that I'll go through in a minute, and also concerns about the future capital maintenance of the large platform on the site on which most of the open space is located. The applicant has advocated that they retain ownership of the site that they mentioned during the public hearing, with a standard sort of maintenance and operations agreement between the developer and the Parks Department. In the event of this no transfer option, there are other alternatives that exist that could allow for greater community involvement in the programming of those spaces. So that's something that is being discussed at this time. So just as a recap, the the waterfront public access along the shoreline, the upland Domino Square are the main open spaces of the site. This project is providing approximately 1 acre of an additional open space over the approvals that are in place today. So the unique design features that were mentioned that are in discussion with the maintenance and operation, they include several artifacts that were located on the site. These are kind of large-scale industrial features located along the walkway. In addition, an elevated walkway at the northern part of the site that would link some of these features. So this isn't a standard parks public space kind of amenity, so that's raising some of the questions about the transfer to the city. In addition, as I mentioned, the site has a over 1,400-foot long platform. Here's a section of that open space, so much of the open space is built on structure. So in the long-term maintenance, it's a concern of transferring that structure to the city. The other open space issue was talking about the phasing of the open space. So the upland site, Site E, is the first phase of open space. Since it's entirely on an upland block, it would not trigger waterfront access requirements in that first phase. The plan was then to start at the northernmost block and work south with the outlines in red showing the open space that would be built with each according phase. The Domino Square open space would be located in the final phase. The applicant has mentioned that due to the construction phasing for Site D and the refinery site, there are issues with providing the Domino Square site in the earlier phase along with the upland building. But they are willing to look at interim uses on that site, similar to the interim uses that are located today on the upland site, the Havemeyer Square. That's just a rendering showing the relationship. Again, these, the large platform, the artifact, large features that are creating this open space. Okay, the other issue that I wanted to do is to clarify some of the points of comparison from the prior 2010 CPCR approvals that are in place today and the Two Trees current proposal. So this has sort of a side-by-side comparison of some of these issues. This is looking at the overall inclusionary housing requirements for the site. The current approvals in place have approximately 502,000 square feet of affordable floor area that are required in order to reach the full FAR for the site. And that 500,000 square feet of floor area gets you to a certain threshold. In addition, CPC had committed to 660 units of affordable housing, and that was above and beyond those inclusionary housing requirements. The current proposal would require approximately 427,000 square feet of affordable housing in order to reach the full FAR for the site. And this is in part due to the text amendment, the proposed text amendment that would exempt a portion of the commercial floor area from the site. And also the refinery building in this proposal is fully a commercial building. So Two Trees has stated that they would also commit to 660 units and 500,000 square feet of affordable floor area. But again, this would would be beyond the inclusionary housing program requirements. On the upland site, the 2010 proposal did have a greater concentration of the ratio of affordable units on the upland site, as that site was a 100% affordable building. In that building, they located 327 affordable units. And in that building, the average gross unit size was about 950 square feet. So there was a greater mix of larger unit sizes. We balanced the 333 remaining 333 affordable units would have been located on the waterfront portion of the site. In the current Two Trees proposal, there is also a greater concentration of affordable housing on the upland block. In their case, the program is a proposed 50-30-20 mixed income development, which would be providing 244 affordable units on that upland block. And that has an average of 781 gross square feet average unit size. So it has on average smaller units than the prior proposal. And this plan, the difference is about 83 units in terms of the allocation of affordable units between the upland block and the waterfront block. Also on the waterfront site, the 2010 plan had a mix of building types on the waterfront that allow for different affordable housing programs, and so this is how they were able to achieve the 202 senior housing and affordable home ownership on the waterfront. The current Two Trees proposal has, again, the 50-30-20 building on the upland block, and then on the waterfront, it's proposed to be constructed using the 80-20 tax exit bond financing. So as you know, the applicant does have the proposed tax amendment that would exempt that commercial floor area. That would result in approximately 43,000 less square feet of required affordable housing to reach their full FAR. At the hearing, there was a request for a rationale for this text amendment, and the applicant has provided a letter explaining their rationale, and that you should have received that in your packages. And further information about the affordable housing program will happen at the February 18th session.
Okay, Justin, thank you. Any questions for Justin? Questions? Oh, Michelle and Betty and Angela.
Well, first off, I just want to say that I know I missed a very important hearing, and I heard a lot about it, and I appreciate all the questions and the follow-up. So if I'm repeating anything, please forgive me. One thing that would be helpful, and I know we're going to spend more time in a future review session talking about the affordable housing in depth, but I'm trying to remember if we've seen a comparison, especially of the breakout on the bedroom sizes between the two proposals. That would be helpful as part of the follow-up in preparation for that conversation. And then I'm not so sure this is, given the Governor Cuomo's change in the 80-20 program, I'm just wondering if there are any implications for this project. Now wait on the. I didn't imagine you to have that correct answer. Yeah.
I think generally, we just want to say, Justin mentioned we got that memo that described the relationship between 421A and the text amendment. And the memo we thought made a very good case for 421A, obviously. We are not certain we fully understand the connection between 421A and the text amendment, even having read the memo. We want to go back to the applicant and ask some questions. It wasn't entirely clear to us. As to your question about the changes in 80-20, we'll have to get back to you, obviously. There are other parties looking at this, including HPD. In terms of the bedroom sizes, the unit sizes, that's not something we would typically see. If there's additional information we can provide, we will, but we don't have that.
We do have numbers on the plan, or at least projected number of 2 bedrooms versus.
We have for Site E.
Betty.
Thank you. My question has to do with the responsibility for open space maintenance. We've seen at other projects around the city when you have construction on platforms or piers, the staggeringly high cost of repairing those piles and replacing them over time. And in this case, I understand, I don't know if the ownership goes hand in hand with the financial responsibility for that maintenance, or is that to be worked out between the applicant?
The way that the transfers have worked for other sites, there's been a transfer which provides the owner with some benefits, the former owner, that is, benefits in terms of relief from tort liability, for example. But the owner, the former owner, also does have an obligation to fund maintenance. And there's a fund that's established both for routine maintenance and for capital repair. But it is a capped liability, if you will. And here, I think what's being said is that the size, extent, complexity of that platform raises some issues for the city about whether that particular approach would work well or not, since it would cap the liability of the owner and put the city in a position potentially of having to address unanticipated issues on a large scale. So I think that's what we're wrestling with a bit here, and why there are issues associated with transfer here that we haven't seen with some of the other sites.
Right, so is the applicant then proposing that they carry that responsibility?
Yes, they would. If they retained ownership, they would.
Okay.
They would, absolutely.
So, I know it's not going to happen right away, but someday there's going to be a very large bill that
That's right.
come due. Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Angela?
So I'll stop by apologizing for not having a complete comparison of the previous voted plan with the current recommended plan. I didn't think we were going to get to the point of discussing some of the affordable housing component today and/or unit sizes and/or configurations. So I do guarantee you all I will come prepared with that 2 weeks from today, because it is very important to me. And in this particular case, the community board gave their approval, and they overwhelmingly gave their approval. But they asked for some concessions in return, and those were some of the concessions. And I stand really strong that with the amount of height that they're getting and what they're asking for, that at the very least the developer could be a little more accommodating. But that's all I will say on that right now. I had the advantage today. I very rarely take the subway, but I did today, and I saw Domino in its full effect, and all I could do was imagine the height of these buildings. And it still perplexes me that the previous development, many of the people in the community, including the community board, had issues with height, but they don't now. That being said, the one aspect of this whole development that I've been completely on record with really thinking is quite awesome is the open space.
Right.
And how it has to be phased in, I do understand, might have to be, in the context of the entire development. The only thing I would want to say, if the other two developments that were referred to, Northside Piers and the Edge, Williamsburg Edge, both did transfer to Parks and Recreation. This one, he's asking that they don't, and I really don't have a firm opinion on that. However, the only thing I would say is that the argument is that if it weren't transferred to parks, it would give the community more of an opportunity to have input into design and other features. And if it isn't transferred, if we all agree to that, us and the powers that be in the various departments of the city, I would like to see something in writing that assures that there will be more community input. And that's
It would be designed before the transfer, though, wouldn't it?
I don't know how that works.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert.
Yeah, I think it would be designed before the transfer, so they should have input.
Yes, the restrictive declaration that Ray Levin explained at the hearing lays out the process of taking us from the point of the city planning approved drawings to a final design.
Mm-hmm.
So that happens, obviously, before transfer. The responsibility in a transfer situation is for the owner to build it out according to the design, for the Parks Department to accept it, and then transfer is made. If transfer is not made, this declaration actually still provides for Parks Department input into the ongoing design development. So I think that issue is addressed. As to community involvement in the design in its details, that's not been the way these projects have been done. They've been done based on a city planning approval, which is then implemented for it. I think what we were focusing more on was the possibility, and this is very tentative and still subject to a lot of discussion, of, in the event of there being no transfer, giving community some input into some of the programming for events, for example, of some portions of the space. That's something that's been discussed in other large-scale developments like the EERC project as far back as 2006, and that's something we're looking at as a form of community input into the space if it's not transferred. So that's where we are.
So far be from me to ever question or contradict you, David, because you are one awesome attorney. You really, I marvel when you speak. So what do I get in return for that? No, only kidding. And you missed this, Michelle, unfortunately, but there was a person who had a farm that was very touching. You know, I just want to make sure that the community does have some input if the owner were to retain ownership. I'm familiar with if Parks Department does take over, it is relatively limited, to say the very least. But anyway, thank you.
Okay, other questions, Anna?
Yeah, just I do have one question about your presentation, but before we get there, I'm glad that we're deferring the discussion of affordable housing so that we can all have time to try and figure out what's in this letter. I read it over lunch and I thought, now, I ought to be able to get my head around this, and somehow it just, it wasn't happening. So I think there's important issues in there to understand. You know, for me, one of the most powerful pieces of testimony we had at the hearing was from Moses Gates of the Association of Neighborhood and Housing Development Companies, where he made two essential points. One about whether or not we ought to be carving out the commercial space and the community facility space. And he essentially made an argument that this was a business decision by the developer that should not carve into the public benefit here, and that's an important issue that I want to think through. And I'm also wondering in my own mind whether there's a difference between commercial space, private commercial space, and community facility space like the school. Those are different qualities of space, and maybe the text amendment applies to them in a different way. I don't know. And then he made another point that we've encountered in some of the other applications, which is that developers now, I mean, when inclusionary housing got started, my understanding of it was that it was an incentive on its own to produce affordable housing. But more and more, we now see these deals that involve layers of incentives, and they're not even layers, they're a complete package. And we're being told that the affordable housing can't get built without at least three elements. And Mr. Gates made the point that those, at least at a minimum, should be layered instead of sort of all in one. And I'm still not beyond the notion that the land bonus, the floor area bonus you get ought to be sufficient to motivate the production of affordable housing. Obviously, that isn't happening because that's not the way the market is responding. But that's an issue that I hope we can get some clarity on when we talk about affordable housing in a couple of weeks. Oh, and to my question. The open space slide says down at the bottom, in the event of no transfer, options may exist for enhanced community involvement in programming of spaces. Is that, but we wouldn't get that if it were transferred? I mean, we do have cases.
If it's transferred, it's managed by the Parks Department according to Parks Department rules, to the extent the Parks Department, for example, issues permits for community events and so on. That happens. What this is about is just one illustration. For example, in the East River Realty approvals, in the declaration, the City Council added language which said basically that the declarant would agree to issue a license to a community organization to use one of the spaces for performance events, and that they would be authorized to issue sublicense to performers to do that. And essentially, with some controls in terms of insurance and indemnification and other things, the declarant was allowing a particular portion of the space to be programmed by a community organization. So that's the kind of thing that we're talking about here in terms of programming of space.
But you could get to the same place with city ownership as well, can't you?
Well, when it's city ownership, then it's under the Parks Department's jurisdiction. They manage it the way they manage any one of their spaces, which has opportunities like that, but it wouldn't be controlled by city planning's approval or by the declaration. It would be viewed as within their portfolio, managed under their practices, under their rules.
And we don't have cases of parks agreeing to take space. Well, maybe this is just theoretical.
Well,
we don't have to talk about it.
I think-
But I think there have been cases where Parks has agreed to processes like that. Probably not to the sub-licensee version, but...
I'm not familiar with that in the context of our approvals. I think what we've seen is when they take the space, and they manage it the way they would manage spaces under their control.
I guess the main issue may be one of a competitive, before they dispose of a space, do they have to solicit parks? Would they have to solicit bids or that kind of thing as opposed to private ownership that's more flexible?
I'm sorry.
Is that a distinction?
I'm sorry. I didn't,
under parks ownership
Yes.
over a space, would access be predicated on getting competitive offers or
I think my understanding is the way that it would be managed under Parks jurisdiction is the Parks Department has rules governing parks, and you, as many of you know, you can apply for permits for special events of various kinds, and the Parks Department will issue permits, and that's what they would do here, and they would look at it no differently from any number of other spaces under their control. They wouldn't give an exclusive. It'd be highly unlikely that they give an exclusive to anybody of any kind under some form of concession. They would probably operate it as a permitted space.
Okay. Other questions for Justin? Other questions? To be continued.
Yes. Thank you.
I think that's the last item on today's agenda.
All righty. So,
Safely?
we'll see everyone hopefully Wednesday. And until then, till we meet again, be safe.
Yes. Thanks. All right. I wish you the best, really.
Okay.
About
I don't know.
Which one is this?